Well, hey, y'all, thanks so much for joining me today on this episode.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Wonderful to be
Um,
with you. Thank you.
Great. So I'm so glad that we can have both of you on. You're going to get your expertise from two different people today. But I wanted a little bit for each of you, Hutz and Jennifer, to share. Will you give just a little bit of your personal, tell us about your family, who you are a little bit, but also a little bit of your background in education in general. And then we'll go into all the meaty stuff. So Hutz, would you like to start?
Certainly. Thank you so much. Well, I do have a background in education, but most of it is in Christian higher education at different colleges that some of your listeners and viewers would know. But as I've gotten older and I've realized that kids are becoming more influenced at an earlier age. And so I made the intentional decision a few years ago to go younger. So after working in Christian colleges, as I mentioned, for several years, I took the opportunity that was offered me to lead a K through 12 school in the northern suburbs of Chicago, which was a completely different kind of challenge. But again, I did that for
Yes, it is.
strategic reasons, knowing that kids are being influenced at so much of a younger age. And so uh, that's what I was doing most recently until I stepped into this position, which we can talk about. In terms of the family, I actually married into a family that has strong classical Christian leanings or background. My in-laws started a classical Christian school in the inner city of West
Really?
Dallas, which is an amazing story how that school really, God used that school to transform a community. Uh, my wife was a teacher there in first grade, and so that's when we first met, and she left a corporate position to go teach in the inner city, and I thought anybody who would do that is somebody I want to get to know. And then my brother-in-law is currently the head of a Christian classical school in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My brother sent his children to classical schools, and we've sent our daughter to classical Christian schools. And so we've grown in Christian education, classical education, especially as a family. But that's a little bit of the background. There's some more things that we can share with you, but that's a little bit of my immediate background prior to stepping into this role.
Well, I didn't really, I knew that this was your background. I did not know that it ran so deep. It's in the blood, which is just incredible, like a walking testimony to what you're offering other people now. So that's incredible. And Jennifer, you have a similar story in terms of corporate and stepping away. And I resonate a lot because I've started a school myself, and it's no easy task. So give us a little bit of your background as well.
Right. So my background is in business, marketing in particular, and my focus in the business world was really on consumer behavior research, so that we were trying to understand what consumers did and what they needed, so that then I can translate that for my corporate clients into what products, services, and support would resonate best with their clients, their most valuable consumers. And so when the Lord called me to Him and called me home, then to be a mom, and I thought, gosh, what am I going to do? And I wanted to use the tools that God had built up in me in the business world and apply it to the world that I jumped into then, which was the homeschooling community, and started 23 years ago in the homeschooling world. 22 years ago, started an enrichment program to serve homeschooling families so they didn't have to car school their children, for them to have a well-rounded education. And then 20 years ago, starting a classical Christian hybrid school, which really was quite unheard of 20 years ago.
Incredible. The school that we started, it was not classical. We used components, but it was hybrid, and it served the families so well. So we'll talk about classical for sure, but we can also touch on what is a hybrid and why does that work as well. So awesome. So thank you all so much for both being on. And you all are both with Turning Point Education. You're doing some incredible work. Your paths have crossed there. And I would love to just, before we really get into the details of what is classical, why is it important, there's a bigger umbrella about what Turning Point Education who you are, what the mission is, and what is it you're trying to accomplish with this umbrella of education. So Hutz, I would love for you to share, just generally speaking, tell us about Turning Point Education.
Yes, well, I'm so glad to be able to do that. Some of your listeners and viewers will know Turning Point USA. Some will recognize the name Charlie Kirk, who founded Turning Point USA about 12 years ago. Charlie began to see a few years ago just what I was referencing earlier, what I was seeing on college campuses, and that is the indoctrination, the woke ideologies were starting much earlier than just when students got to college. In fact, professional acquaintance of mine, Dr. Robert George, who's a professor of jurisprudence at Princeton, I recently heard him interviewed, and he's been there 39 years, probably going on 40 now. And the question was, Dr. George, in your 39 years at Princeton University, what have you seen change in the lives of the students, or in the makeup of the students? And he said something very interesting, Suzanne. He said that I began to notice about 10 years ago that the students were coming already indoctrinated in high school and junior high. We would argue, Jennifer and I would argue, that starts as early as elementary age, and
Yes, I would
unfortunately
agree.
even earlier. So Charlie began to see that. All that to say that a little over 3 years ago, he started a new division called, at that time we were called Turning Point Academy, uh, but now our name is Turning Point Education. The mission remains the same, and that is really to provide an alternative in the world of education to what's happening in the government public schools, and in the indoctrination of our students across the board. And it's not just in government public schools, although it's
No, it's
certainly there,
not.
but private schools, and unfortunately, even in some Christian schools that have kind of been entangled in some of those ideologies as well. So, Turning Point Education is the K through 13 education division of Turning Point USA. And we have a number of initiatives, though we've really worked hard to stay focused. One of those initiatives is that we're starting schools, and maybe that's something that we can talk about, but we have developed what we call our 5C model of schools that we're helping to start across the country. We also are doing educator summits, or equipping educators. We just had one in Tampa, Florida, which was just such an incredible experience for all of us. We had an amazing lineup of speakers, but what really made it amazing is the people that came, and we can talk a little bit about that. We've also identified areas where we felt like there was a need in the curriculum. We haven't heretofore tried to come up
Yeah.
with a comprehensive K through 12 curriculum, because there's some good stuff out there. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. But where there's a need or an opportunity, we have created some specific pieces of curriculum that we feel like really have met a need and have been well received, which we're so grateful for. And then we have our association, where we have folks like you, Suzanne, that are making an incredible difference in the world of education. And we're trying to bring those folks together from across the country. And so we have individual affiliates, we have school affiliates, we have organizational affiliates that share our values, that I think you would appreciate. And then our fifth major initiative is our newest one, which is our prep year, which is post high school, prior to going on to the next chapter of life. We're very excited about it. We're launching this year down in Fort Worth, Texas, but it's for 18 to 20-year-olds. And we have an amazing inaugural class that we're going to launch with. It's a 9-month in-residency program, and preparing students to have a foundation for life, regardless of what career pathway they may take. So that's kind of a broad overview of what we're doing at Turning Point Education.
So tell me again when the gap year, for lack, is that, are you calling it a gap year?
No, we don't.
Or
We don't use that word intentionally.
okay,
Right from the beginning, we
is that
wanted.
the K-13?
Yes, that's where the 13 comes in.
I love it.
Yep. And prep year, I mean, we could talk a lot about what's happening in colleges, and we referenced already the woke ideologies, but the cost, the expense, what is actually being learned, and there's all kinds of questions. So we feel like there's a better way. And this prep year, though, to describe it to your listeners, they may understand it as a gap year, but there's nothing gappy about it. It's intentional.
I love that.
It's
I
intentional.
love it.
And in a nutshell, we're teaching our students the great book as the foundation. So in other words, looking at all of the world and life and studies through a biblical worldview lens. We're teaching them the great books of Western civilization, Western literature, why those are important, the great philosophers. We're teaching them the great documents of our country, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, Federalist Papers, Anti-Federalist Papers, why those are so important yet today in our nation. And then we have great mentors, we have great presenters, teachers that are coming in, people that your listeners would know, names that your people would your followers would recognize. And we're going to invest significantly in these students. And we've been very selective in who we are choosing. And actually, we have students from Alaska to Florida and from California to Maryland. And so really from across the country. But these are students that have already demonstrated leadership aptitude and ability. So we're not trying to make them leaders. They're already our leaders. And now we're going to help equip them to launch them to whatever career pathway the Lord may be calling them to. And we actually explore 5 different career pathways as potential next callings for these students.
That is just tremendous. I bet you are going to have, if you don't already, a wait list a mile long. And I might just add, I heard you say 18 to 20, but you may want to consider doing that for adults that are far beyond 20. I just think so many people are eager to be equipped and realizing how we weren't equipped growing up. We haven't been equipped for a very long time. And so that is so exciting. And when does that kick off this fall?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right after Labor Day. We go from Labor Day to Memorial Day. So it's 9-month in residence.
Okay.
We have some really exciting things planned, but you're 100% right, Suzanne. I mean, most of us, I'm actually, until I got to college and I went to a Christian college, but K through 12, I was in the public schools and I didn't have a civics class.
Right.
And, and I didn't understand biblical worldview. Certainly in my public high school, they didn't teach biblical worldview. I've had to learn that after the fact. And so you're right. Most people are not trained in those kinds of things. And then, reading the great classics of Western literature, I got a little bit of that at college because I did go to a good college. But, again, so many of our people are just get a pragmatic education, a utilitarian education, and really not so much in the liberal arts anymore. And so it's a shame. And as a result, we see what's happening in society and see what's happening on college campuses across the country. So we think this is going to be a great alternative. We're excited, and we're launching it this year.
So exciting. So exciting. Well, Jennifer, tell me a little bit, because I'm guessing that the curriculum that you all have created aligns with trying to get what's happening in this prep year down into the lower. It's so interesting that Hutz is saying, hey, I was up here and the Lord's like, go lower. I felt the very same thing. When we started a school, it was really like, get to these kids before the walls get up around their throats, like reach them young. And so I'm guessing that some of the curriculum you are creating yourself has to do with what the older students are going to be going more in depth with. Is that correct?
Yes. So we're actually attacking this in 2 different areas. So first, addressing the curriculum that we've created, it's really supplemental in nature up to this point, focused on civics education, because we really want young students to love America, understand how important and fragile it is, and that they need to really kind of carry that torch forward. So we want to give them exciting ways to learn about our country, how it was founded, why it was founded, and why they should continue to fight for it to be the amazing place that it is, and keep it solid. So that is our curriculum that we've created. Very fun, kindergarten through 12th grade, wonderful tools that focus on that civics education.
It's great. A few years ago, when all of this curriculum was, 2020 and everything starts to be revealed, there was such a focus on, rightly so, on social emotional learning, DEI, comprehensive sex ed, all. But one of the things that I've talked to parents a lot about that I don't think rises to the top, because obviously if you're teaching kids what they're being taught in comprehensive sex ed, that becomes very alarming. But I got my hands on some curriculum that, or a summer curriculum that was coming out of one of the bigger counties in Georgia. And it was Action Civics, or iCivics. And so the word civics was still out there, right? But what we would think of as civics and really learning about the Constitution and learning how the government works and all that was not what this is. This was literally teaching activism. And I would say to parents, learning what activism is and learning how to be an activist, like being informed about that, okay. But what I found so alarming was that they were assigning the students the topic that they needed to be an activist about.
Right.
And it was pro-life, pro-choice, and we know where that landed. And so not only did the students have to come up with, like, they're being taught, this is what it means to be an activist, this is how you do it, this is where you go, this is what you do at the Capitol, but it wasn't about what was in the child's heart or the worldview that they had. It was, here is the topic and now how to carry it out. And so I think just having parents understand the necessity of a civics curriculum, but also there is something being taught, but it's not how we define civics. And so understanding what action civics is iCivics in comparison to what you're doing, and how to adopt what you're doing and get back to truth is so critical.
Right. So Suzanne, that's a great segue to the other initiative that we have, which is these 5C schools. Because what I would say is we don't need to teach activism if we teach virtue and courage
Right.
and perseverance. And we teach truth, right? So that's what we're doing in these 5C schools. So the 5Cs that we're talking about are Christian, classical, conservative, collaborative between parent, church, and school, and cost affordable. And so we believe that the undergirding of this virtuous kind of education, then we hope students will be courageous enough to be independent thinkers and speak truth, but it's undergirded in the real truth, God's
It's
truth.
just incredible. So Hutz, in terms of starting schools, what does that look like? Because as we've talked, and what I've sort of learned is it takes a lot of different shapes. There's not a cookie cutter, this is how you do it, and here are the 5 steps, and they all look the same. But how are you helping parents, teachers, I hope pastors, I'm praying for pastors to have a vision for schools, but how are you helping schools take form, and what are you offering?
Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head here, because as we began to look at the landscape of what was needed, there are, as you just said, there's different models of schooling, and there are many good models. There's some that are not so good, but we were looking for a model that would be true to our values, but also that we could scale across the country. And leading a 5-day a week brick and mortar school for several years, uh, there's some benefits with that. There's also some incredible challenges, not the
Right.
least of which is finances and the cost of creating such a
That's right.
school from scratch. So we began to think in terms of, is there a different model that we can be, again, true to our values, but help scale across the country so we can have greater impact? And the school that Jennifer started 20 years ago really has become our model school for this model. So we're not trying to be all things to all people. We realize that this model is not a model that's going to work in every situation, but it's a model that can work in many situations. And so we look at this as really a partnership with parents or churches. And you'll find this interesting, Suzanne. 90%, maybe 95% of the schools that we're helping to start across the country are in partnership with local churches.
Are
And
you
and the
kidding?
reason for that is both philosophical but also practical. Practical in the sense that the two highest expenses that I had as a head of school, and I think every head of school would agree
Right.
with this, is your personnel costs and then your building and grounds
And the
costs.
building.
So we
That's right.
needed to, to drive that down. And my school was in the northern suburbs, still is there, of Chicago. And depending on where you are, this is either a lot of money or a little money, but it was close to $18,000 a
Yeah.
year. And for a lot of families, that's just priced out of their range. I mean, it's one thing you have to pay it once, but if you have two, three, four, 5 kids, and then you got to
That's
pay it
right.
the next year, and we tried to raise $1 million in financial aid, but it's still priced to many families out. So we wanted to drive the cost down, and so in partnership with local churches, there is our building and grounds, if you will,
That's right.
in most every case. And some churches really look at this as an academic ministry. We're thrilled when that happens. Some of it look more at it as a business arrangement that will lease space to the group. But in in any case, that drives the cost down of the building and grounds. And then the other key component of our model is what you've alluded to in the school that you started, is a hybrid model. We think, again, philosophically, and Jennifer can speak to this, there's some really, really good reasons for that approach to education. But on the practical side, which is what I'm speaking to right now, it drives your personnel costs down, because now instead of paying
Exactly.
teachers full time, I mean, I had 100 employees, and you pay, full time benefits and Social Security and health insurance. All that. I mean, it is a big, big lift. But if you drive that down, and now you have excellent teachers, but they're being paid part time, you don't have the benefits. Again, it helps drive the overall cost down. And so, in our model that we call the 5C model that Jennifer was speaking about, we are actually coming alongside of groups. We don't put our name on it. We don't
Okay.
charge for what we do. Jennifer directly oversees the from incubation to launch of these schools, and then we continue to mentor them and support them and encourage them in every way we can. But these are the school. The school belongs to the group that we're working with, not to us. And we've just had the great joy of being midwives in the process, if you will, and
Love
helping to
it.
birth those schools. So it really does drive the cost down. And Jennifer can speak to the cost, but I think you and your listeners will be a little bit amazed in terms of how we can provide such a quality education for the price point that it is. And I'll just give you a personal testimony here, and then maybe Jennifer will want to
Yeah,
augment to what
I
I
would love to
said. But
hear.
the school that I was leading, just to give you a frame of reference, was ranked by niche.com the number one Christian high school in the state of Illinois. And my daughter attended our school. And then we became convinced of the model that we are now helping to start. And so our daughter actually transferred over to Classical Consortium Academy in Barrington, the school that Jen founded and continues to lead. And we believe very strongly that our daughter was getting a better education at that school than the school that was ranked number one in the state of Illinois, for all kinds of reasons, but largely because of the model of education and also because it was classical.
That's incredible. And Jennifer, I would love for you to share what is a hybrid, and I I just yes and amen to everything you're saying. Having had children, my own children, go through the margin that it allows families, but also from a leader, the cost, all of it. This hybrid model is such an incredible model. And a lot of people, it's so interesting, they'll understand what a homeschool co-op is. They're starting to understand what micro schools are. You know, a lot of the terminology is starting to pick up. Hybrid is still one that a lot of people look at you and say, what are you talking about? What does that even mean? So I find it interesting, and I love the fact that this is the model that you're really pursuing. But will you share a little bit in detail what it looks like?
Sure. So the way I explain it is students are full-time students, just part-time under the roof of the school. And so we're really in partnership with parents. Now, as Hut said, we are seeding or birthing these schools around the country, and each of them look a little bit different. And so I would say we feel very strongly that when students spend more time with their parents and their siblings and their peers, it produces really great students for so many reasons that I'd be happy to discuss. But what we really believe is that a flexible schooling model planted around the country is one that can help serve really all families. And so we're advocating for, a couple of days of academic work, a day of enrichment, as well as a couple of study days, and giving parents the flexibility to do whatever combination of those days under the roof of the school really helps serve all families. But I believe strongly, we all believe very strongly in the hybrid model. And that is one where our students are going to school a couple of days a week. They are getting the instruction that they need, kind of sitting at the feet of wise teachers for those days, and then having time on their own to wrestle with that material during daylight hours. And this is really wonderful because rhythm, this rhythm of getting that rich education, but then having time yourself to really dive in deep and going, okay, what do I believe as I'm
Yeah.
quietly wrestling with this material, as I'm reading these great works of literature, as I'm thoughtfully thinking through how to articulate myself in a paper, spending that quiet time wrestling with the information really is what produces great critical thinkers. And that's so very important. When we have our kids in school 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and they're being spoon fed by teachers, and they don't have the time to really wrestle with the material. And in this trend these days where people are getting rid of homework, which I
Yeah.
understand why. I understand that
Because
they
they're there
want.
for their whole life. I mean, they're there for hours, right?
Right, right. You think like get it done in the 8 hours a day that I've given you my kid. And I totally understand that, so that these students can have family time and have personal space time and do their activities. But what that's doing, taking away that homework, is taking away that time where the students are wrestling with that information. And so, unfortunately, I think by that very action, we're creating less of a critical thinking population, not more. So what we believe is give the students the homework, but don't have them behind a desk 8 hours a day,
That's
five
right.
days a week. Have them do that wrestling during daylight hours when their minds are fresh, when they really can think through these things. And so I believe so strongly in allowing students to do that. And we've seen over 20 years the benefits of that.
It's incredible. It's such an important point. I think 8 hours. You think, oh my gosh, you should be able to get it done in 8 hours. But how do you process with 30 people in a room or 20 people in a room? I mean, even if you have time, just the fact for many students, just the fact that their friends are around, or there's movement, or we're coming, or we're going, there's not the time to actually take a deep breath, step away, right, and process the information, much less be thoughtful about what you think about the information. And so I also think, and this is just a personal opinion, but I bet y'all agree, the ability to be able to talk to your parents about what you're thinking about an assignment. At 11 o'clock at night, as teenagers, they do come in to talk to you at 11 and midnight, but it's not about what they're doing at school. There's so little time at the end of the day, if you're in a sport or any other activity, to actually process anything with your children, or for them to process anything with you. And so the strength of the family, I found in my family, like the siblings were closer, and it wasn't because we were doing anything magical. It's just they had more time to get to know each other, to know what they thought, to know what your parents were thinking. And so just the margin that it allows academically, it's awesome, but it's also building strong families, and strong families build a strong society. And so it's I think powerful. Also loving the fact, if you're going to homeschool, I think it's awesome. But I do love the fact in a hybrid situation that the students are with other adults who are like-minded. And so what they're being taught at home, if it's being reinforced, I mean, we have so many situations now where students are under under an authority that parents have put them under, having no idea that authority is telling them, don't trust your parents.
Right.
Right. So after our parents have entrusted your children so I think just there's so many benefits to hybrid. And I'm going to I'm going to go back real quick and just mention, from a leadership standpoint and a practical standpoint, one of the things that we were able to do with teachers, because I think a lot of times teachers say, well, if it's just a part-time school, how am I going to afford it myself? Like, how I need the income. But we would have a cohort of, a Monday, Wednesday cohort, and a Tuesday, Thursday cohort. So the teacher would have a full week. She would just have two smaller classes, same number of students she would have in another classroom, but she was getting paid a full-time salary. She just got to break that up. And so there are ways to organize a hybrid so that the teachers get the full benefit, but the students and the parents get the margin. Are you finding that?
Yeah, that's a great example. And conversely, there's some wonderful teachers, mother teachers that don't want to teach full time.
That's exactly right.
And so, they've opted out of the teaching market, if you will, because they don't want to work 40 hours a week. They want to be able to have some time with their children. And so we find that we're able to attract some wonderful teachers who want to teach 1 to 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week, that are great teachers, often mothers, sometimes fathers. But for them, that's the extent that they want to teach. But now we have the benefit of drawing from these excellent teachers that would not be teaching anyplace else because they don't want to be 40-hour-a-week
That's
employees.
exactly right.
So it goes both ways. And but right, and that's the beauty of this model, is that it can allow for that.
I love it. I could talk about it all day long. But I do want to dive in a little bit. Jennifer, why don't you take this one, and then I want to ask Hutz a little bit about the association and how to get involved and that type of. But I would love for people to understand what classical education is. There are so many philosophies of education. And I think most parents don't think about that. They think about curriculum, if they're thinking about that at all, right? They're thinking about what curriculum are you teaching, or they're being trained to ask that. But there are philosophies of education that really are more about how a student is learning. And I find that parents don't really know that. And so they haven't been exposed to, maybe Montessori or Charlotte Mason or classical. And so it's hard to begin with the end in mind if you don't know what your options are and what you're trying to produce. And so classical education is such a strong philosophy with such strong results. So will you explain what it is so parents understand, and the why?
Absolutely. So classical education really does start with the why. Now, it is an ancient form of education that has harkened back to Socrates and Plato, but what we're talking about here is classical Christian education. That education that Plato was talking about, it was seeking truth. He just didn't know where it was grounded, but we do. We know that it's grounded in God and Jesus Christ. And so this idea of classical Christian education really is, the purpose is to help our students achieve their chief end, which is to know God, glorify Him, and enjoy Him forever. And so that's where this education is oriented first and foremost. It's not this little hamster wheel of, I'm going to teach a student so that they can get into a good college and get a good job and make money so that they can consume things, right? That's not the purpose. When we lift our students' eyes higher, we can, they'll get a good job, right? They'll get the job God intends for them to get and be in that career and do excellently in that. But that's not the purpose. We aim higher than that. And classical Christian education is undergirded in this idea of the trivium. So if we understand how students' brains develop, then we can lean into that, and we know then what subjects to teach them when, how to approach those subjects, and how to approach those students. And so what you'll often hear people talk about with the philosophy of classical education is that it's founded on goodness, truth, and beauty. And that it is. And though each one of those words is connected to, I believe, that levels of the trivium. So the trivium at its core are just the three liberal arts: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. But they're attached to this understanding of how students' brains develop. And so students, when they're about kindergarten through sixth grade, they're really good at memorizing things. They're concrete thinkers. And so at that stage, we lean into that ability and say, you know what, we're going to give you the solid foundation of facts, because we know you can memorize those. You probably won't understand everything that you're learning and how those things connect, but at least if I can give you that strong foundation, lean into that memorization, then I can give you a common lexicon or vocabulary for the grammar of all thinking. Then, as you get a little bit older and you can think more abstractly, we can introduce the how and the why of things. And in those middle school years, if any of your listeners have a middle schooler, they know that those guys can argue, right? It's their
Yes.
natural inclination is for you to say that the sky is blue and them to say, no, it's purple. And you, as a parent, oh my goodness, you want to pull your hair out of your head. But guess what? This is totally natural for these students to want to argue, and they're trying to reconcile what they know and what they're observing to new things. And they're trying to figure out how those things piece together. So we lean into that. And what we do at this stage is ask them good, thoughtful questions,
Hmm.
have them encourage good, thoughtful debate with peers so that they can argue to get to truth. So we teach them things like formal logic and critical thinking so that they argue from a point of fact rather than emotion. So that's how
So
we're leaning,
critical.
right? We're leaning into this natural inclination, going with the grain and teaching them how to do this well and winsomely. And then in that high school stage, we call that the rhetoric stage. If you can recall back to when you were in high school, it was probably the time that you started to care about how you presented yourself to others, right? That usually came in the form of how does my hair look and
Right,
what
right.
clothing am I wearing, right? Or how many ear piercings I have,
Yep.
all of those. But it's natural that students are concerned about those things. And what we say to our students is, all right, you care about it. I want you to care about how you articulate the thoughts in your head. And so, in written form and in oral form, those things are important. And so, we really lean into that in their high school years.
It's great. Follows the way God has designed us to think. It's just it's
Right.
beautiful, really. I think it's just so often people have no idea, and then doing this with a hybrid, the parents are learning. That's what I loved about. I was learning history that I'd never learned before with my children. So it's really coming along I think the whole family teaching them how to think and how to have conversations. It's incredible.
Exactly. Every parent will say, gosh, I wish I was
I know.
educated this way. This makes so much sense. Why didn't I have this education? And so, the beauty, you're right, about homeschooling your children, partnering with a hybrid school, is that you get that education that you wish you had. And this is education that is worthy of our children. That's the thing that I want to help
Hmm.
parents understand. It's not about exiting the public school. It's not about running away from something. It's about casting a
That's
vision
right.
about a kind of education that is truly worthy of their children. And that's what we need to focus on because it's not just, oh, my public school isn't so bad or my student's teacher isn't so bad. No, no, no. That's not the bar. The bar is so much higher than that, and our kids are worthy of so much better.
I agree. I years ago when we were looking at starting the school, I started to really study what is education by definition, and really dug in. And I love Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary, right after the Bible. I mean, it is out all the time. So happy when the app came out. So I really started to dig in what education to what is it? And the four components, that it's instruction and correction and taking knowledge to a place of understanding, the formation of habits. And the more I dug into that, I'm like, we're not even defining education properly. Most of what we're defining, we talk about education with the definition of academics, like courses or subjects. And when it's sort of just, I'm like, gosh, what we really need to be doing is saying our student is the subject and they're being prepared for life. And the way that they're educated is for instruction, not just teaching, but instruction and to be corrected and to learn how to be corrected. And so it's so rich, it's so deep if we get beyond what we've all just done and accepted as education. There's just so much more to it, and it's beautiful, really, to use one of the words, right? Okay, Hutz, I can you help with understanding just the association or in the affiliates? What does that look like for individuals or for teachers? Who's it for? What does it look like?
Absolutely. Well, let me give you a vision for it. One of the things that we wanted to do right from the get go is to bring people together, we call them education advocates, that are doing some wonderful, amazing things from across the country. And people like you, Suzanne, that people who know you are blessed by the work you're doing and the great instruction and help that you're giving them. But we want to expose you to others and others to you. And so we're doing that across the country, inviting people to join arms with us so we can work in collaboration, that we can have a stronger voice together than any of us individually. And so we formed the Turning Point Education Association almost 3 years ago, and we invite people to check that out as a possibility. We don't charge for it, but we do ask people to subscribe to our values, which are clearly outlined on our website and other places. And so that's our common foundation, and I'm sure that many of your listeners would be able to share those values. And then together we're calling our folks to, first of all, be informed. And so every week we send out an update of what's happening in the world of education. And there's a lot that's happening from the national level to the local level to what we're doing at Turning Point Education. We have monthly webinars where we speak to areas of interest for educators, just across the board kinds of topics where people are invited to come. And this is just for our affiliates. We have special opportunities for our affiliates at our educator events, our summits that we do, our conferences. They're able to attend virtually for free, which is just amazing. And I think, though, the biggest opportunity, though, is to be able to be connected with each other and to realize that, oh, I can learn from Suzanne because she has this amazing podcast that she's doing and she's really helping parents. That's something that I want to make available to our homeschool group. And so those are the kinds of connections that are happening. One of our colleagues, Scott Pollender, is our director of the association. So any of your listeners can get more information about that at our website, Turning Point ED, all one word, turningpointed.com, and you'll see the process. But we like to say it's all benefits and there's no cost. But it's a great opportunity, and we would invite any of your listeners or viewers to take advantage of that. We would love for them to be in the inner circle. We have a broader circle of people that are part of our universe, but the affiliates are really our inner circle. And you can join as an individual, a school, or as an organization. And Suzanne, the other thing that I'll mention very quickly, I know that Jennifer just hit classical education ever so quickly. She actually gives a 45-minute presentation about classical Christian education every month as part of our Vision to Virtuous Education webinar that we do. So it's actually a 2-hour webinar, and what we're trying to do is cast a vision for the kind of schooling that the three of us are talking about today. And so we share about our 5C model, we unpack that, and then we talk about how you as the participant can consider potentially doing that in your setting as well. But as a part of that webinar, Jen really drills down on really what classical Christian education looks like, and people find it very informative. And I'm sure Jen would say even 45 minutes doesn't completely do justice to it, but it does give a better understanding, so people begin to understand. And this is the last thing I'll say. It's interesting to me as a parent, as an educator, that parents so often will spend more time researching the next car they'll buy or where they're going on vacation than checking out the education, the curriculum, the teachers of the school that they're going to, whether it's public, government, Christian, or private school. It's just very interesting to me. So you're helping create awareness. We're trying to create awareness that not all education is created equal. There's some very good things that are happening. There's some not so good things that are happening. And it's incumbent upon parents to do the due diligence and the research to really understand the education that my children are getting, to be intentional about it and not just, well, I'm sure it's good because they're the experts.
But I have one more question I want to ask you before we start to wrap up. But I do want to comment and just have a confession on that one. When we stepped out, and I was co-founder, there were 5 of us that started this little school, and we started to do the research. My co-founder and friend Kimberly, she loved research. She had homeschooled. That had been her. We called her the hardcore homeschooler. My husband and I had done every kind of education you could do up until this point. Covenant Christian, non-covenant Christian. We'd done a little bit of public. We, had hybrid, a little bit of homeschool. We'd done it all. And when she loved curriculum, and she started to really dig into the curriculum, and I got excited about it, and I was learning and I was watching, and I had this moment at home one night when I thought to myself, why have I never asked the question? Why? I didn't ask it in public school, but I also didn't ask it in the little Covenant Christian school that was as solid as a rock. I just I didn't ask. It never occurred to me to ask what is going into my children. I get cold chills still thinking about it, and this has been 15 years ago. And I think that's one of the things that we really have to take ownership of as parents, and personal responsibility of just this blind trust for what's happening because I did it and I turned out okay. This is the way I'm going to go with my children. But we're not even on the same planet really as when we grew up. And so I love that you're just reminding parents, you can partner with other people. I mean, God's entrusted your children to you. You will be the only one that answers to God about your children. I mean, you're it. Tag, you're it. We all partner. We don't do anything 100% of raising the children that doesn't come from the home. I mean, they grow up, they're exposed. But who we partner with, what they believe, are they like-minded, what those values are, just stopping long enough to just ask the question. I think parents are waking up to that, which leads me to just a final question. I'm curious as to the trends that you're seeing. So you've been doing this for 3 years, but what trends are you seeing with parents? Maybe they're negative, maybe they're positive, but what are you seeing? And I'd love for both of you just to answer quickly. Are there some trends that come to mind that you want to share?
Well, I think one of the trends is what you're just speaking to. I think parents are beginning to wake up, but slowly.
Yes.
And that's why we're trying to wave the flag. And I would just say, to follow up what you said, everything we agree with 100%. I would say part of the reason too is that parents have been conditioned not to ask questions by the schools. In fact, they're not even invited in a lot of the schools. I
That's right.
know a very recent example of two parents, and this was actually a Christian school, that they were told they're asking too many questions, and there were questions like, well, can we visit chapel? No, you can't visit chapel. Can we visit? No, we can't. And so I would say to your listeners that any school or any kind of schooling situation that does not welcome questions, that does not welcome inquiry on the part of parents, run from that school.
That's right.
And so I think, but in answer to your question, I think we are seeing more parents waking up. I think we're seeing some more pastors waking up again, albeit slowly. Um, you know, for our country was founded with pastors being the center and churches being the center of education of the children in their churches, in their community. And then we moved away with that with the onset of public school education. But we are seeing a movement back with more pastors beginning to reclaim the responsibility for the education of the children, the students, the families, and even in the community, which is a very encouraging sign, but so much more to do. And then I would say, and I think Jen could speak to this even more, but there is a exploding interest in classical education across our
Mm-hmm.
country. More and more parents are waking up to this powerful form of education that, as Jen alluded to, is not new, it's old, but it's really being rebirthed in the last 15, 20 years. And we welcome that. We think it's a powerful model of education, it's powerful pedagogy. And so we certainly welcome that.
Love it. Jennifer, did you have any others to add?
Yeah, so I think that parents are waking up to choice because their dollars are becoming more freely used in the way that they see fit. And so all of a sudden you're getting this um, I think going from that monochromatic, like, oh, this is the only thing that I
That's
can
right.
choose, to, oh, now my world's in color, right? The government's giving me back my money. I can put it toward education. And here are just, I think our educational options will be exploding over the coming years. And so I love that. And I think it's, as you and Hutz both alluded to, parents need to, as choice increases, they need to be that
Mm-hmm.
much more discerning about what type of school they send their child into. And so I'm excited about kind of the education entrepreneurship. I'm excited about people realizing that school doesn't have to happen only 5 days a week, 8 hours a day behind a desk, that they're starting to wake up to not only the different philosophies and pedagogies, but just the rhythm. And I love it. I believe that we thrive in a world of choice, and I think the more we can educate parents properly in the kind of education that's worthy of their kids, the better those students will be in the end.
Well, y'all, what a great conversation, and I'm thrilled with what you all are doing. I'm glad parents are waking up, but not just waking up, that there's actually a place to go that will help them. I think there are parents that are waking up that have a vision, and this is the way I'm going. But there are many that are willing to do something. They just don't know where to start. And so I love the flexibility, the support. And I will say, you said the word free about 50 times. I mean, just the fact that you all are able to offer this to people and with no or very little cost is such a blessing. And so thank you for being on today, and just for sharing and for what you're doing, and for opening the door for so many people to step in and really be informed, but also equipped.
Great. Well, thank you,
Thank you so
Suzanne. It's
much,
been great to
Suzanne.
be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get this out to people, and we'll have everything in the show notes. So I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Wonderful.